Hello. So again, now that we actually put this in the spreadsheet, so next time anyone says, well, I think this or I think that, well, then you can ask him, show me the spreadsheet. You can see it right here. We actually put down all the submissions. I took the time to actually look through each one of them. These are the submissions and which organizations were in the submissions. The submission nation of submission, where the submission was declared from, and also where these countries are registered. Keep in mind that just because you're registered in Switzerland does not mean that it is a Swiss organization. It is by registry, but it doesn't make it any less Moroccan if it's Moroccan administrated. So clearly, the definition here is it not necessarily, we could say Moroccan administrated or Moroccan. Same thing for the Algerian diaspora. I included that same methodology for here because Algerian, of course, situation with registering organization, we know it's difficult. So a lot of the organizations are Algerian diaspora or Algerian led. So this is the same methodology that I'm using for both. I'm not simply using it for one or the other. And you can clearly see by the look here. And I also want to remind people just that submission 4 was actually the one used to reference freedom of speech and expression. And so just keep that in mind, which submission was actually used for representation of Algeria number one. And remember that it was hardly ever covered. It was covered once in a while in the vast herd of Tindouf paragraphs. But just so you see who it was referenced for the Algerian priority. And you can go down here and you can clearly see the organizations. There are plenty of Algerians within the international field that did submit, and you will say that there are always certain organizations are always lingering around when that does happen, but that's up to you to make that kind of distinction. You can see there's plenty of Algerian references if the report um, if the report constructor wanted to use Algerian sources. And take a look at these organizations. There was nothing on them online up until this date. I would not be surprised if something all of a sudden showed up. But at this portion, up to this date, there is almost nothing on these organizations online. Yet they were referenced quite a bit. And you can see here, for example, another one. Lots of Algerians. These actual submissions were actually pretty good. They had a lot. They were not really skewed one way or the other. So again, the choice in the construction of the UPR is particular. So here, right here, you can clearly see 49 out of 98. These are the joint submissions. So again, there's no secret formula here. You literally take them, put down all these, and then from here, go to data. You literally go to stats, column stats, and you will see 49 out of 98 were Moroccan, 26 out of 98 were Algerian diaspora. As for Algerians in Algeria, there was only 11%. And then so about 3/4 of this entire document was not Algerian, but it's not really the primary concern, because had they took heed and listened to Algerian concern, that it's really not an issue. It would be a thank you very much for international solidarity. Again, here I literally took down every single paragraph, and I put exactly which submission is from, who are in the submission, and then of course the link and what it is concerning. There is interesting patterns when you take a look at this. This is the beauty of spreadsheets. And again, once someone gives you an opinion and you ask them, show me the spreadsheet, show me where you got that from. It's easy to talk in empty air and to have general philosophical conversations, but how does that play in act in real life? So let's take a look here, and you can see exactly which covered what. For example, submission 5. You can also see which covered freedom of expression, and I believe that was SJ4, yes, for freeing the detainees. So really, honestly, had they just done this, it would have been, thank you very much, we appreciate your support. But it was more than that, because interestingly, for submission 4 is, let's just keep that in mind, paragraph 27, freeing detainees. All right, that was like one that mentioned about arbitrary detention, nothing else did. So let's just keep this in mind right here. And then everything, and so we see these Algerian submissions. There are Algerian submissions, yet the odd part is look at what they were covering. Algerian submission, actually, submission 12, has a lot. It covers all fields, really. It covers it has a huge coverage, a huge range from freedom of expression, literally go down human rights. So it's pretty encompassing. The odd part was look at what they mentioned it for. They mentioned it for LGBT and homosexuality decriminalization. And again, all Algerians deserve the right to be free and to their dignity. However, I just think it's very, very interesting that at the very least they could have, when you see all of these Algerian organizations, that they could have been also used for the priority of Algerians as well. Yet that's not the case. Where it was mentioned was again submission 4 by Morocco. Okay, so then you say to think, well, maybe submission 4 was extraordinary. Maybe it was better than the Algerian submissions. So let's take a look. You can follow here so you know exactly where to get the documentation here. Civil society, you go down here, take a look, submission 4, right here. Take a look, and it's you can see who is involved right here. And it is clearly a freedom of expression and liberty in Algeria. All right, so let's go down. Again, they have some pretty interesting things, but then the references that they use to everything here is Algerian organizations that actually submitted. And the odd part is that they have these, they're talking about submissions and stuff with Euromed and Cairo Institute. And it's, well, if that's the case, then why weren't those Algerian institutes, Algerian organizations referenced themselves, like right here? So it seems like it's a third source. Why in the world would anyone writing anything go for a lesser source? It's not to say that anything negative about them, but it's just very peculiar why to reference Algerian #1 priority, which is freedom of expression, to have another source that references this source. And again, you might say, well, why would that even be the case? Because also recall what the procedure is for the stakeholders report. Recall that the next step to this is that countries, as we meet with diplomats, with working groups, and working groups get to read this and use this document. So when they're thinking about, okay, I want to talk about freedom of expression, who did the Human Rights Council reference? Oh yeah, SJ4. Who's SJ4? Let's see if we can get an appointment with them. So for Algeria's top priorities, probably, and again, this is why you reference things so people can see which submission talked about what. It would have been with these folk, not Algeria. And again, keep in mind, this says CDH and it says Milan, Africa, and it says, but this is a Moroccan organization, and clearly you see that here, and this is from Mauritania, but it's always working with with this organization if you actually Google it. So it looks like it is, but it's not. And you can see this here also. They made a submission on their own, and clearly here it says that they are from Morocco. But again, please do not take this as a tit for tat, or this is, hey, let's go do the same thing to the Moroccan submissions. Absolutely not, and I would be extremely against that. This is not done by the Moroccan people. Moroccan people and Algerian people have always had a unity. We are the same people. But this is to show you that there is definitely interference, and this is political. But the worst case, again, I repeat, the worst case is not that these organizations did that. You can almost kind of expect it. But why did the Human Rights Council of all people do this? And you can take a look, and again, we can take a look at the old documents from 2017, UPR, Stakeholders Report 2012, and 208. And you will see that there isn't any mentions of extrajudicial killings or any of the sort. There was no mention in 2008. There was no mention in 2012. There was one mention, but it had almost nothing to do. There was no extrajudicial killing. It was nothing. It was just basically civil freedom of speech and things of that nature. And then to all of a sudden, to go to 16, really 15, actually explicitly mentioned Tindouf, and then one paragraph which was referenced about the health and of children and nutrition, but it was it was put in the document as if it was a national issue. But if you go back and look at the reference clearly says Tindouf. So again, there's a lot of very interesting, peculiar coincidences, and I'll let you come to your own conclusions. But to all of a sudden say, to actually mention status of limitation on there, and to have never mentioned it before, and now to say that all of these things have taken place here, is a bit odd. And another odd thing is that the two organizations, and again, I will allow you to do your own research, two organizations of these Moroccan organizations that did here. And this time, in 2017, what they did is they both wrote a submission together. And they said that actually all of these happenings, the reason they were happening, and they were away from Algerian authority. I repeat, they indicated that it was away from Algerian authority. Those same organization, the same two, split their forces, and now they're part of two joint submissions. And in both cases, they indicate that it was the Algerian forces themselves. So either they had very bad news before, or they have very bad news now. As to their credibility, quite obviously contradictory. And so it's in my opinion, but again, that's my opinion, that's very telling on its own to all of a sudden include all of this. Further, you take a look at the submission breakdown. You can clearly see here by submission who had the most coverage. Even if there were, again, a lot of Moroccan organizations, clearly there were Algerians. Why weren't the Algerians mentioned more? So you can clearly see here, for example, and also take a look at this organization. You will find that the person who actually wrote the submission, her name is on there. She was a intern who was hired within 1 month to make the submission and left 1 month before the working group. So that's another interesting who got basically more coverage than anyone else, more than Amnesty International. That's very interesting. Okay, and here's another here, and this is by nations, right? And you can clearly see the yellow is really anything else. The red is Morocco, and you can clearly see how much 19 paragraphs. They got the most, and Algerians, this is all we got. And these are Algerians in Algeria. That's all they got. Okay, topics covered. Tindouf, again, 16. 15 were directly implicit to actually mention Tindouf. 1 was supposed to be for Tindouf. But actually, the way they mentioned it in the OHCHR report was that it was nutrition on a national scale. They did not put anything. So that's indicative all on its own. And there you go. Civil war, again. Treaties, death penalty. You can again, take a look and feel free to do the same thing I did. Take a look over here, break it down. Maybe, again, categories can be different. There are different ways of analyzing things. But on a general scale, I believe our numbers would probably be very, very similar. And here, I did it this way so you see exactly what covered what. And you can clearly see that Tindouf by far takes the cake. And here are some of the submissions. Again, go to the submissions. I highly recommend, so you see exactly the language. It's very interesting, the names that they mentioned. They mentioned certain things that took place in these dates. They also have dates that took place in 2012, 203, and they use references from 2003 to talk about how things are done now. And again, all of this at the cost of diluting and not mentioning Algerian voices. These are the individual organizations and who they are and what they are affiliated to. There were also mistakes here. This was a joint report, and this was a joint report as well. And again, this is just to see how much each organization was given. You take a look at these organizations, you see how much they have. You take a look at the reference. One of these things over here is it did have Algerian organizations, and it mentioned quite a bit. It was mentioned a lot of things, yet however it was only used for the civil war, and it was all used for LGBT. It seemed that they don't it seemed like that Algerians were not mentioned for what their number one concern. They were not referenced for their number one concern. Again, here SJ10, I highly recommend people read it. Very, very high quality. SJ10 and SJ9 I thought were really, really good quality submissions, and it's almost like mind-boggling why they weren't used so much. And actually, some of these that were used, please rate them. It's just like they're terribly written, in my humble opinion, and I don't understand why those were prioritized. Okay, and here's some more information. Again, this is when I started to see that those vocabularies were there, so of course I took them up to look and found, and this is how I found all of that. Again, you could take a look here. In 2022, there were 19 paragraphs. It was a total of out of 64, 30% were given to Morocco. And 2017, not that far ago, they only had 2. Okay, and only one of them mentioned Tindouf, so that was perfectly okay. In 2012, nothing. In 2008, nothing. So again, this this is very, very peculiar. One more time, it's again, please do not take this to be indicative of anything else other than this document needs to be removed. And let's not get into the tit for tat. Let's not get into that game where we Algerians and Moroccan versus each other. We are brotherly nations. And this is not representative of the Moroccan people, and I am sure it is not representative of all the government officials. Clearly, this is a political agenda, and it needs to be removed. This document is dangerous for Algeria because, like the document clearly indicated, status limitation on there, and can be used at any point in time. Even if we become super democratic, guess what? That this document remains there. So again, thank you very much for your time, and please continue your advocacy.